Hello. Today I'd like to show you how I make a block, an alternate block to use with some of the larger scale printed fabrics that are around. They're such delicious fabrics, and I found this one with these wonderful owls on it, which are full of colour. Obviously this is more of a child type fabric. It doesn't have to be a child fabric. The block I'm using is just something that kind of breaks up in between something like a larger print, so that you don't have to cut the larger print down so that you can't recognise it. So I've just cut some 8.5 inch squares out of my large print, and then I'm making a block that goes alternately, which has got 2.5 inch and 4.5 inch cut squares in it. So I thought I'd just quickly run through how I do that for you. So for my centre square of this alternate block, I've got a 4.5 inch square, so I've got some 4.5 inch strips here that I've cut from my width of fabric, and I'm just going to cut a 4.5 inch square. I've actually got two layers together, so I can cut two at a time, and I'm using the measurements on my board to help me with that. So I'm just going to trim off the end, and then I'm going to come along 4.5 inches and cut at 4.5, so that because it's already 4.5 inches wide, I've now got a couple of 4.5 inch squares. Also, I might have chosen to do, instead of a constant fabric, which I am using this time, I might have chosen to do them out of these colours, so you could just have an assortment of different colours there. But I thought this was kind of fun with the owls and the stars. And then also I'm going to cut some 2.5 inch squares out of all different colours that I've found in the fabric in general, or something very close to. And again, I've got my 2.5 inch strips here, and I've got about 4 stacked together there, and again I'll just trim off the end so that they're all neat and the same end, and then come along 2.5 inches, and you can just keep cutting along, of course, until you've cut your strips. So there you've got quite a few 2.5 inch squares already. So not a hard thing to do. Don't want to layer too many at one go, because if you do, it can make it move and they can get distorted, but probably 4 is quite a good number. So in order to, I've actually already cut some squares that I've got here in these colours. So what I normally do is I put them together in pairs. So I'm just going to go to the sewing machine, and for one block we're going to make pairs to go on the sides and then there. So you need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pairs of squares, in other words 12 little squares to go around your block. So I'm just going to join up 6 pairs, which you can chain piece. We'll just make one block today, and then I can show you how I put it together. And I'm just picking them up pretty much randomly. I've got them mixed in their piles, and I'm just joining them together. I'm not worrying particularly which one goes where. Could regret that decision, but usually I don't. It doesn't worry me to have things random like that. So this is number 4 pair. This is such a fun quilt. You can make it in so many different colourways and different sizes, and it's just a good block to do. As I said, the block comes out at 8.5 inches, so an 8 inch finish block. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more. 6. And we'll do one more just in case. Now, first of all, I'm going to press these. Well, I'm actually first of all snipping them apart, and then I'm going to press them. So I'm not too worried which way they go, because it's all going to be kind of all over the place. So I'm just holding them up and pressing to one side from the front of the work. I find that works best. I do like to press as I go. I find I get a much better overall result with my work. So this one that I'm making is probably just for a cot quilt. I have done a pattern for this, I'll show you shortly, that's on my website on gourmetquilter.com. I've done the pattern actually in 2 different sizes, and it has two different names because I used two different fabrics when I was doing the patterns. But I'll show you that shortly. So now I've got my pairs together, and so what I want to do is put a pair of squares either side of my central square there. So I'm just going to go back to the sewing machine now and do that. So because you've joined them together, your centre square was cut at 4.5 inches. These little squares were 2.5. Joined together, they'll be 4.5 inches in length, so it should fit your centre square nicely. And I'll just come back and do the other side while I'm here. And whilst I'm here, I might join up my other bits as well. I need to join these into two lots of 2 pairs, so 2 lots of 4 squares in a row. Right, that was my spare. So if you were doing the whole quilt, you could be doing several blocks at a time because you can chain piece, so it's quite a good quilt in that regard. Now I'm actually, because I've got a white fabric for my centre square, I'm actually going to press those seams into the squares just in case it wanted to show through. So that's done now. Now because I pressed those seams out, I might just want to make sure when I'm pressing these, because these are going to sit either end now to bring that up to a square block, and I want my seams to be able to butt, so I'll just need to make sure that the seams, these 2 seams are pressing in that way. The middle one doesn't really matter which way it's going, but because I want it to butt against these ones, and that one's already going the right way and this one's not. So this is probably the only time I really press from the wrong side, but I'll still bring it back and press from the right side just to make sure I can see which direction those seams are going. And I'm getting in a tangle here. And the same with this one, I'll want to make sure those seams are going in so that they'll butt together and nestle nicely. And that's my 4 squares in a row there. So at this stage I'm just keeping a little bit of an eye out for where my colours are. I wouldn't want to put them round that way, for example, because I wouldn't want the 2 greens together. It wouldn't particularly worry me if they end up there, but because I'm watching what I'm doing just a little bit, I'm going to turn that around that way. And the same thing with this one, I probably would try to avoid having the 2 reds together, but just by turning that row around, that will fix that problem. And so now I'll go back and sew these 2 sides on, and then the block will be done. As soon as I've done this, I'll show you a couple of quilts that I've made using this block. It's always nice to see something finished if you can. A quick press. And I'll just press that out towards the squares, again away from that white that's in the middle there. And there's my block done. Didn't take too long at all. Just move some of these bits and I can just quickly lay this out a little bit with a couple of these squares so you can get an idea. So I'm probably going to just alternate them. So we'll have a little owl, and I just think that looks fun. It's bringing out all those colours but still allowing you to see the fun little owl there. So you can see just by using the same colours that are in the quilt, in the fabric, that can make it kind of nice and vibrant, but you're still going to see your nice print that's here. So this is the pattern that I've done. This is for like a cot size quilt. This is called Animal Squares. This is available as a downloadable pattern on my website on gourmetquilter.com. And I might quickly show you. Oh, I've also done the pattern. That's the Animal Squares, does the small one. I've done the same block in this quilt pattern here called Jungle Squares. That also is available as a downloadable pattern. That's a larger quilt, so that's what the difference is. The block pattern is the same, the fabrics are different, and the size is different of the quilt, not the blocks. So this is one of the small ones, like the one that I'm showing you here with the owls. I've made this one up in that sizing. Fun little fabrics, great for a young child perhaps, on the cot, on the floor, somewhere, in the car, on the couch. So you can see where I've done all those, picked out again the colours that were in the fabrics. And then the Jungle Squares I've done with a real jungly fabric. So my main fabric is this wonderful jungly with all the animals and the foliage and things, and then I've picked out various animal prints, and instead of keeping one fabric constant, I've used a different fabric which I've also popped around the borders in the middle of my block each time. So that gives it quite a different look, and it kind of just all merges together, but you can still see all that nice jungle print coming through. And then, but wait, there's more. There's one more that I've done again in the bright colours, but in the larger size, again with the jungle print, but a much brighter coloured one. This is probably a single bed size, and this one here has got this fun, really bright, modern sort of jungle look. And again, I've picked out all the colours, and I've done different colours throughout there as well, rather than a constant fabric. So that was just to give you a bit of an idea of one of the ways you might use a larger scale print, where you can still see the pictures and just emphasise some of the colours and things. So hopefully that will be a nice quilt for you to make sometime. Thank you.